go ahead and get things started off. So my name's Francesca Pharo, and this is my Emerald Star project. If you weren't aware, it is a steer fitting clinic, but we've added some extra clinics for you guys to attend. So we have Dr. Harlan here, who's going to talk about vet care for your steer. We have Alina, who's going to talk about nutrition, and Austin Day is going to do fitting and clipping for the show. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about showmanship at the end, and then we'll finish off with the raffle. And at the very end, we'll have some older people in here if you want some help with your steer. You can bring your own animal and work with them. So to get started off, this is Dr. Harlan. He graduated from UC Davis. He's been working as a vet for 43 years, and he's been at Katati Large Animal Vet Hospital for 42.
Thank you. So you can see there's a reason for the gray hair, right? So instead of, there's a handout for vaccinations, and I'll tell you right from the front, that's probably one of the most important things that you do. We're going to talk about quality assurance a little bit, how to make sure that animal's healthy, and I'm all about prevention instead of treatment. And one of the reasons is recently the FDA has changed all the antibiotic rules, especially in feeds, and now they're all prescription items. We are seeing, for the longest time, we kind of denied that from the livestock industry, of actually saying that we were seeing resistant bacteria due to overuse of antibiotics. There's enough proof now to show that we are probably causing some resistance. The big problem is, of course, in the human field, when we have antibiotic resistance there. And a good friend of mine who was 36 years old was skiing in the Sierras and came home. He had cut his leg, and he actually got meat-eating bacteria that they could not cure. And they took his leg off, and he still died. And they used the best antibiotics they could. Some of the antibiotics that we're using in cattle, I don't think we should probably be using, because those are the ones that we're using as a big gun, actually, for people. Just to visit a little bit about that, sometimes I see an animal that's been sick and it's already had 3 different antibiotics. If we want to get a resistance, that's how we're going to do that. On my clients, if I want to stay with one antibiotic at a time. If I'm treating an animal and temping it, and that's the thing we're going to go on, is temperature more than anything else. Invariably, I get a phone call, the steer's sick, he's coughing, and can we come and pick up some antibiotics? And I ask what the temperature is, and they don't know. We think he has a fever. So probably number 1 tool to learn to use is the thermometer, and they're digital now, so even us young guys, middle-aged I should say, can read those digital thermometers. So your normal temperature, anybody want to tell me on a steer? Again, this is kind of a little bit interactive, so not real tough. Yes? 101 to 102. What do you say? Or 100 to 102? That's perfect. If it's low below that, and sometimes I've seen it, so normal for people is 99.6, and I'm not too concerned. When I get concerned is when it's over 103. Now on a warm afternoon like we've been seeing this week, 103 out in the hot sun could be normal, so it's not a bad idea to take temps twice a day and see what it is in the morning. My whole idea though is trying to prevent so we don't have to use antibiotics. I've got a steer right now as an example that the people wanted to use a particular antibiotic that has a 28 withdrawal. And for the fair, for meat withdrawal, that's going to be real close to the county fair. I wasn't brave enough to use that particular antibiotic. So if we can prevent that to start with, that's going to be a whole lot better. Invariably, you'll get your steer, and most people say it's had all its vaccines. And I'm not calling those people liars, but don't believe them. Go ahead and vaccinate anyway. And if you see that vaccine that I have for you is beef cattle, so we're going to be talking about looking at like that yearling or replacement heifer. I'm going to talk real briefly on my particular beef cattle. My replacement heifers will get a modified lot. I'm probably not recommending that for your steers. I'm going to go to a kill product and come back and booster that in 4 to 6 weeks. On a kill product, most of them are actually labeled that. If nothing else fails, don't be afraid to read the label. And you know, we answer a lot of questions on the phone every day, so if you've got questions about what you should be vaccinating, don't be afraid to call us. The respiratory viruses that we're mainly concerned about are IBR, BDD, PI3, and BRSV. That's in that 5-way. It's also in a triangle 10. It's also in a boa shield. The boa shield product, and there's several modified live products.
Thank you, Dr. Harlan. Next, we're going to have Alina Amaral come up and talk to you guys about your nutrition of your animal. And Alina is a Cal Poly graduate. She graduated with a major in animal sciences. She's currently a 4th-year vet student at Western University, and she raises registered Angus cattle.
Hi everyone, thank you Francesca for having me. I don't know if you all got my little PowerPoint, it's very brief, but I just wanted to go over some basics today as far as beef cattle nutrition. I'll be talking more about steers, but we can talk about heifers if anyone has questions. I just didn't want it to get too complicated. Okay, so just some basic concepts to go over. First, I thought it was important that we knew different types of nutrients. So there's 6 big nutrients. Oh, and throughout the presentation, I'll be asking to involve the audience, and you'll get raffle tickets if you stay involved. So, of the 6 big nutrients, what is the most important one? I'll let you use the microphone.
Water.
Yes, that's correct. So sometimes that's one that doesn't come to mind, but water is a very important player when it comes to cattle. So it's important that we have clean, fresh water. And that might seem very basic, but it's also very important. I read a fun fact the other day, and I don't know, I've never heard this before, but it makes complete sense. If you restrict your cattle's water to 90% instead of giving them full, fresh water all the time, they will reduce their gain of 25 to 50%. I think that's pretty significant, especially when we're trying to get these steers fat for Sonoma County Fair. And I just think that shows the importance of having clean, fresh water all the time. Some of the other ones we'll go over briefly, such as minerals and vitamins. I didn't go into depth in that in this little presentation, but those are just important for growth and performance. Usually all the grains that you guys are feeding that you get from the feed stores, those include a mineral and vitamin mix in there, so you shouldn't be too concerned about it. But we can also talk about supplements. I also didn't go into depth in supplements in this presentation just because that's a whole other world of feeding cattle. So the other important ones we have are your energy nutrients, so carbohydrates and fats, as well as proteins. Proteins are important because those are organic compounds that are just amino acids, and those are the building blocks when feeding cattle. So those are important for muscle growth. So if we want our cattle to grow, we have to give them protein, and there has to be an adequate amount of protein in your feed. And the other ones we have are fat and carbohydrates. So fat are important because that's a big energy feed, especially when we're getting to the end of the term when feeding these show cattle. A couple other things we'll talk about later in the presentation is just briefly how to read your feed tag. I don't know if everyone looks at their feed tag when they get it from the feed store, but it's important to know what's in the feed that you're feeding to your cattle. And And then we'll talk about feeding for your body type. So when you select your steer at the beginning of the year, back in the fall, we want to know how to properly feed that steer based on maybe what breed they are, or what if you're feeding a heifer instead of a steer, or just like their frame size and how to feed for that frame size to get them adequately fat when you need them to be fat. So if we flip our page, we can move on to the next slide. So talking about energy feeds a little bit. I know it says on there, but if you didn't look yet, what's the #1 concentrate fed to cattle in the U.S.?
Corn.
Yes, corn is correct. Francesca, you can have a raffle ticket. So corn is a great feed to feed to cattle. It's a low in fiber, moderate in protein, but very high in total digestible nutrients. It's also grown a lot in the Midwest and becomes very easy to feed to the cattle as it's very cost efficient. There's some other concentrates that we can feed, such as wheat, oats, and some of these are safer to feed. Like Dr. Harlan was discussing, we can grain overload our cattle. We can also get what we call is a cattle that's too hot. We can put them on feed that's too hot, and that's when there's too much corn in it. So we need to be careful, especially at the end here when you guys are starting to add corn to your steer's diet. So a lot of the steer finishers have enough corn in there, but we might start cooking corn, adding rolled corn, doing a little more to get them fat. But you have to be careful and add that in slowly. If they get too hot, then they'll get diarrhea and just completely go off feed. Sorry. And so that's no good, right? When we're trying to get them to that end point. So wheat is pretty comparable to corn, except it's a little higher in protein. You might see that in some of your feeds. Milo is not quite as common, but we might see that. Important with Milo is that it's not fed whole. This Milo has to be processed by the feed distributors. Also oats. You might see that fed at the end as well and added in. Oats are a very safe feed, so they might not get your steer hot like corn will. So that's a safe feed to feed. You won't get that GI upset, and that will maintain your animal at that fat deposition that they will have at that point. Does anyone have any idea of what % fat should be in the diet when you're looking at your feed tag? What was that? So she said 9 to 14%. Actually, for fat, you might see like 2 to 5%, depending on what stage your cattle are in and what grain you're feeding. You were close. That's actually for protein. So protein is around that 9 to 14%. Usually you see around 11 to 12% protein, which we'll talk about on the next slide. Also, we have molasses as one of the energy feeds. I find that that's a good thing to add in if you have a steer that's kind of picky and doesn't eat, and they like sweet feed. You can add a little molasses on the top and make it a little more palatable. So it's easier for them to eat. They like the taste better. So molasses can be beneficial as well. Okay, let's keep moving on. Anyone have any questions? Okay, so we already talked about protein and what protein is and how it's important in the diet. Some of the protein feeds you'll see in your diet are cottonseed meal and soybean meal. What's kind of interesting about those feeds, they're very similar to corn as far as their TDN, but they can have a lot more protein. So they can have 40 to 47% crude protein. I also have some feed samples here. We can pass these around. They all have the guaranteed analysis in there, so they're a little feed tag, and you can look at what those different feeds look like. So that's kind of interesting. So you will see either cottonseed meal, soybean meal, usually in your cattle feed. Any questions about protein? That's kind of fast, but... Okay, the next page is a feed label. And this is showing it for a medicated feed, which is important, especially when we're feeding steers. It's important to look at that withdrawal that Dr. Harlan was talking about. Some things I'll just touch on briefly is we have that guaranteed analysis section that's in the middle there on this feed tag. And you'll see it on these samples of feed going around. So the important factors to look at there are your crude protein, you'll have the crude fat, fat and the crude fiber. So remember how we said maybe that fat will be 2 to 5% for these steers, and that protein around 11 to 12%. So you just need to look at, is this a starter steer or are we finishing this steer, and what percent of those do we want in his diet. The other important things to look at are the ingredients. So we were just talking about different feedstuffs and what will go into making this grain. So you can look at those ingredients, and usually those are listed by how much of that ingredient is included in your feed. So on ours, it has ground corn first, so that'll be the #1 ingredient. So there's the most of that in this feed, and it goes down in decreasing order from there. As this is a medicated feed, it has instructions on here, and it also has that withdrawal. So that's one of the most important things on these steers going to the fair. You want to make sure you have adequate withdrawal on any medications you're using. Otherwise, there will be drug residues in that meat. Does anyone have any specific questions about feed labels? And then let me have you do it in the microphone so everyone can hear you.
So on the bag it says that it has ash in it. What is ash?
That's a tough question. You're making me work today. Okay, so ash is, Austin will correct me if I'm wrong. Austin went to Cal Poly with me. He'll be talking later. It's when they burn off the feed, whatever is left is the ash. And that's the percent. So it's usually a pretty low percent. Is that good? Did I do okay? Okay. To go along with that, does anyone know what dry matter is? I think dry matter is something important. So we have either dry matter or as fed. So feed labels can be on an as fed basis or a dry matter basis. You always want to look at dry matter. This is looking at the feed once all the moisture, the water content is taken out of it. That way we can compare the feeds. So if we have an oat hay versus a silage, you can't compare the nutrient values in those feeds unless you're looking at the dry matter content. As silage has about 30% moisture and other roughages, oat hay or so, might only have 10% moisture in it. So then you can't compare them if it's on an as-fed basis. So make sure if you're ever looking at your feed labels, you're looking at dry matter.
Okay, so next we're going to have Austin Day come up and demonstrate some clipping and fitting for you guys, but before that, I'm just going to go over a few things that you would do prior to getting your steer in this chute. So the first thing is you want to blow them off to get all the dirt that you can off of them before you wash them, which makes washing a whole lot easier and a whole lot less messy. And then you're going to wash them with some soap, get them super clean, scrub them down, and make sure that everything's all good. And then you're going to blow them off and get them ready to be clipped. So I'm going to invite Austin up, and Austin is a Cal Poly grad with a major in dairy science and ag business. He's also a cattle pharmaceutical rep with Elanco Animal Health, and he showed cattle for 9 years and now raises steers and heifers.
Alright, now we get to do the fun stuff. So we can start out just by kind of going over general hair care. Can anybody tell me which direction you're supposed to comb the hair? There's a few hands. Can you tell me? Yeah. Exactly. And why do we go from the back to the front? You guys up there. Say that again. Yeah, you don't want to make lines, and you also want that hair to stand up. So if you're combing it from head to tail, that hair's going to lay flat. And you want that hair to stand up and stick out and kind of just pop. You want that steer to look bigger, more muscular, fatter, more conditioned. So when you go and you're combing your steer, just remember that you want to pull that hair out, not necessarily just comb it forward. And a good way to condition that hair and get it to pop is to use hair conditioners. We got a few supplies over here. Revive is a great hair conditioner to use. Anytime you're washing or just combing your steer, just go ahead and spray this in. comb it in and then just kind of blow it out. It makes sure that that hair doesn't get burnt right, and make sure it stays looking good. Then we can also talk about the different combs here. So this is your standard comb. You can get it in plastic or in metal as well. Let's see. Why would you want to use a plastic one instead of a metal one? Yeah. That's a good reason. I like to think if I step on it, it's not going to go through my foot. But the cow is also safe too, that she doesn't get stepped on. This is also a lot more sensitive. So when you're combing, you don't have to worry about it scratching or harming them. But I like the plastic comb because it's just a lot gentler. But when you go down to the leg hair, you start putting glue in, the plastic combs, they gum up a lot faster. So we want to use a metal comb whenever we're using adhesives or glue because it's a lot easier to go through those without having to use 15 combs. And here we got the Smart Sensation. What's this one for? Nobody? Okay. I like to use it on the legs. It helps kind of pull that hair out. It's a lot easier to train hair, so you're going to want to train hair to stick out. It's a lot easier to repeatedly use this and get that hair to stand up and stick out and train it to do what you want instead of going in every direction. It's good to get cowlicks out and use it to kind of train it to go the right way. Alright, now you comb the hair forward. What about when you're blowing a steer out? Which direction and where do you start? So you want to start up here, blow the hair forward, and work your way backwards. You don't want to leave lines. So when you're blowing the steer out and you're going this way, you're going to leave lines kind of like cowlicks. You're making cowlicks go this way. Whereas you work backwards, you're kind of blowing those cowlicks out and not making sure there's no lines. Now when the cow's wet, the steer's wet, and you're going this way, it's kind of counterproductive because you're just going to be blowing the water back onto the steer. So you kind of want to, it's kind of an art as far as starting in the front and working your way back, but kind of drying it off as you go and making sure that you're not there all day blowing out water. Yeah. So we kind of want to blow her off. Any questions so far? Get into start fitting. You want to tie their head like this because it's going to keep their head still. They're not going to be able to just swing it back and forth and screw up. You want them to stand as still as possible so you don't dig her. So there's all kinds of different adhesives. There's Prime Time, which is kind of a medium adhesive, and Tail Adhesive, which is an extra strong adhesive. It all really depends on what kind of hair the cattle has. If it likes to lay down flat, it's a lot easier to use Tail Adhesive to bring that hair out. But you want to be very careful not to put too much in. That's almost the worst thing you could do is put in too much adhesive because there's no way to go backwards. Once there's too much adhesive in there, you can't get it out. Always want to make sure they're very clean, because if there is any dirt or oil left in the legs, the adhesive has a harder time sticking to the hair. You're going to have a tougher time getting that hair to go where you want. So same reason you're pulling the hair forward, you're going to want to pull the hair up so you get that hair to stand out and look bigger. One of the traits that's looked for in beef cattle is you want real big bones. It usually means they're good structured and able to handle carrying a lot of muscle and fat. pulling the hair out like this is a way to make them look like they've got bigger boned and bigger footed. But why do we fit them up in the first place? Right there. Yeah, you want to make them look better. You want to make them, hide some of their flaws. So not every steer is perfect. You want to be able to hide their flaws in a subtle way and make sure you're making them look as best as you can. Any questions so far? Okay. The tail adhesive that he's using kind of leaves a white sheen on the hair. It's very white and strong, so I would recommend using tail adhesive to make sure that you're able to paint the animals. I know a lot of shows have rules where you're not allowed to use paint, so you want to be very conservative with the tail adhesive. If you're using prime time, it's a little clearer adhesive. You can use a little more. It's also not as strong, so it's a little more forgiving. When you're spraying it on, you can spray a little more on and still be able to comb through it. It's also another white adhesive. It's in a red can. I can't remember what it's called, but it's a good one to start if you're just getting into fitting. Easy comb, thank you. Thank you, Steven. Yeah, if you're just starting out, it's a good one to start with. You want to be really gentle. You're using a metal comb and get a little sensitive down by the hook. So make sure you're very gentle and not poking too hard or pulling too hard. Pull all that hair out. And you can see right now he's kind of pulling that hair forward to a point. So that's making that leg look a little wider from the profile. You kind of want to pull that almost like a mohawk. And then it'll make more sense when we start to clip as far as making a line and kind of making them look better. You always want to make sure they're standing correctly too. He's a little stretched out or a little bunched up or not standing like you would show him in the ring, and you fit him up and clip him as he's standing incorrectly, and you get him into the show ring, he may look a little different. You want to make sure he's standing how you show him in the ring so that you're not surprised when you take him out and it looks different than when you left the shoot. Yeah, so we use the white paint kind of just to build up the legs and help them look fuller and more complete and not thin and piecey. So you're kind of just building a complete structure, and also another use is kind of helps see the hair better, and when you're up there close, it's a lot easier to see white hair than it is black hair, so you can be a little more detailed and get a better sense of what the leg looks like before you put these black things back on.
So now, in about 5 minutes here, if you guys want to go grab your own animals, we're going to rearrange some things so you guys can come in, have some people who have shown a lot, look at how you guys show, get some tips, advice, and go from there. So if you guys want to go grab your animals and the show stick, you can bring one in here. Then we're going to have like a sort of mock showmanship class. So Alina's going to be our judge, so just for those of you that know what you're doing, look out for her. For those that don't, we'll give some tips and things to do. Austin for coming out, and Steven and Robbie for helping me fit. So if we can get a round of applause for those in the audience. So for those of you showing, I'm sure a lot of you have shown before, maybe some of you are new. Generally, showmanship is about you working well with your animal, making your animal shown to the best ability it can be shown to, and as I said before, teamwork. So knowing your animal, practice before shows, different things like that, going out bonding with your animal, that all contributes to doing well in showmanship. And during showmanship, you don't use these halters. You want to use a nice show halter that will be flashy and show up in the show ring, and you will have a Scotch comb in your back pocket, which will be facing you, and when the judge touches your animal, you have to brush it. What? So as you first line up, it's typically a rear view from your steer. So you want your steer to be set all four underneath themselves so that the judge can get a full butt view and is able to see everything. So the judge typically asks you to walk just as Logan did around there. So you turn into yourself and pull your steer through. As you're walking right here, make sure to look at the judge and keep eye contact with the judge throughout the entire showmanship class, but also don't forget to check in on your animal and keep looking at your animal. If another steer in front of you is slowing down or not moving, you can give them a little tap with your show stick or your hand or whatever to make sure that they keep moving. As you're coming around, when you line up, make sure that there's about 4 to 6 feet in between you and the steer in front of you, just to make sure if your steer's fidgeting or something, you can do a circle and readjust, or you don't hit the steer in front of you. Something to work on at home is to see if you can walk them right into that, so that one foot's a little bit off kilter to the other one, like Logan has her steer set up over there. As I said before, that if you're behind another steer, make sure that there's about 4 to 6 feet in between so that you guys can, don't collide. When setting up the feet, if you need to adjust your feet, you can use your halter to help persuade the feet forward and backwards. So if you're trying to move a foot forward, you can pull a little bit forward on the halter, and same goes for the backwards. Just push backwards on the halter. If your steer's in a place where they're set, they might be a little off. Try not to fidget, especially if the judge is looking at you. That way you seem confident in yourself and your steer, and you're doing better. A lot of judges appreciate it if you don't go too hard with your show stick and you're really swift in movement and gentle with your animal, which tends to show that you've done a lot of work and they know what you're asking of them. While you're showing your animal, make sure that their head is always raised up, and as you're walking, you can raise their head too. Okay, so since Maria's in the middle, we're gonna go with her to demonstrate some things if you guys on the outside want to watch. So if your front feet are a little off, see how she fixes it with her front foot and her show stick to center it exactly where she wants it. If your steer's back is not as straight as you'd like it, you can use your show stick to press it down, and it's called loining. That way it straightens out, and you can do that typically when the judge walks by so that they see it in their best view. As you can tell, Maria has excellent eye contact, but make sure you remain in eye contact with the judge at all times. Well, not at all times, but a lot of the time in the show ring to make sure that they're seeing you and that you see them. Before, space is a really important factor in case your steer starts acting up or something. You have to be able to pull them out of the line and pull them back into the lineup, so make sure you've got that 4 to 6 feet. Again, you can use your show stick if your steer's acting up a little bit. It can calm them down, so just keep brushing them with it and scratching them, and they should begin to calm down a little bit. Okay, and finally, 5040. Go for it. Thank you guys all for coming out and supporting me. I hope you enjoyed. And thanks to everyone who helped and came and spoke.